Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Glowy podcast. Feels like it's been a while. Not been much to talk about during the World Cup in terms of Man United, but we've only 1 week to go now till the season restarts. So, how's it going, Nigel? You glad the World Cup's nearly over?
I am. I'm hoping it'll be a decent final. I've been disappointed by some of the games. I think some of them have been fairly boring, the early stuff, but I can't wait to next Wednesday for United Burnley. No.
Yeah, there've been some exciting games, some one-sided games in the World Cup, and some really dull ones. But yeah, you want and my preference in the final is to see Messi against Mbappe, Argentina against France. But we might not get that. Morocco could shock everybody again. But Croatia kind of run out of steam against Argentina. We wonder if Morocco will run out of steam as well against France. But in terms of entertainment value and wanting to see the best players play against each other, I would rather see France against Argentina. Is that how you feel?
Sorry about that. Yeah, the other thing is that they're both sitting on 5 goals in the tournament, Mbappe and Messi, and that's adds a bit of spice to the game.
Yeah, and the winner of the tournament could be the favorite then for the Ballon d'Or at the end of the year. So it could be a massive game if France get through tonight. So if we move on to United, what I'm going to do in this podcast is look back on the tour of Spain, look ahead to Burnley, and then also talk transfers and talk takeover latest as well. So just looking back on the Real Betis game and the Cadiz game, United lost both those games. Although it was what's left of the first team in the first halves of those games, and then a lot of more youngsters playing in the second half. So what was your main takeaways from those two games?
Well, there were a few positives. I mean, the teams really were mismatches because of the main part of the squad being away in Qatar. But Asif Iqbal impressed me. He played both games and looks very, very good. He's 19 now, and he looks to be as if he's been coached very well by Ten Hag and McLaren, etc. Uh, young Manu now, who scored in the first game, came on as a sub and scored. He's now 17 years old. He's been at the club since the age of 9. And I understand that the coaches believe he's come back and he's built up his body. He's physically fitter. And even though he played last night in a team that was an under 21 team, and he's only 17, so we've big, big hopes. And other aspects of those Spanish games, Kyle, was that there was players playing that hadn't played really much at all this season. AWK and Brandon Williams, etc. So he had to run with what he had. It didn't surprise me, or it doesn't remotely worry me that we lost those 2 games. It was to get time in the first team for the players that the manager and the club hope to bring through in the coming years. So I thought both games were useful and not remotely disappointed in the fact that teams playing at a higher level eventually won both games.
Yeah, you mentioned Kobe Manu there. He played a pivotal role in United win the FA Youth Cup last season. Him and Garnacho. I think Manu's still only 17, but like you say, there's massive hopes for him. And he could be someone that could also be fast tracked into the first team, like Garnacho, in the near future. So, would you like to see him make his competitive first team debut before the end of the season?
Oh, definitely. If you believe in a player and you think he's of the required standard, there must be an opportunity found for him, even if it's in the League Cup and the FA Cup. Notwithstanding, we want to win both of those trophies if we possibly can, but it is an opportunity for a guy like that to let's see what his medal is and can he mature sufficiently to play maybe 30, 40 minutes in the first team.
What did you make of the 3 goalkeepers on the bench? I mean, I think I joked that eventually we're going to field an entire 11 of goalkeepers the way things are going. I mean, I thought it was bad enough that we had 2 goalkeepers on the bench in a lot of Premier League games, but now 3 in this friendly. It's just absolutely absurd, isn't it?
It is madness. That's absolute madness. I don't understand the way Tom Heaton, well, of course, the manager made the decision to bring Dubravka in from Newcastle. But Tom Heaton, I heard Christian Brush talk about it in your previous thing. He's a very, very good goalkeeper, and I think he deserves more chances than he'll possibly get.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be one bit happy with being relegated to third choice. Because I think he came in under Ollie with the expectation that he'll be the second goalkeeper when one of Henderson or De Gea left, and that has happened, but he is still the only third choice. And we've seen that the Ten Hag favours Dubravka because in that League Cup game against Aston Villa, Dubravka started the game, and he may well start again on Wednesday, but maybe not because De Gea hasn't been involved in the World Cup. But we'll wait and see. But yeah, Tom Heaton has sort of become the Lee Grant of the squad now, unfortunately for him. And I think he's a better goalkeeper than that, isn't he?
Oh, he's quality, yeah, and his distribution's very good, and he's very self-confident. He's played the game at a top level for a long time, and he looks very sound to me.
Yeah, I was just listening to getting sidetracked a wee bit here, but the most recent Man United podcast came out there from the club, and it was De Gea who sat down with the MUTV, and he said that he got his first team debut at 18, I think it was, at Atletico purely by chance. I think their their number one goalkeeper got injured at the World Cup. The second choice keeper then got injured during a game in Champions League game, and he had to come on as a substitute. And then he ended up becoming the number one goalkeeper just like that. So sometimes you get opportunities just by injuries or suspensions, don't you?
Yeah, well, the most prevalent one this season, of course, is the demise, for whatever reason, of Jadon Sancho has promoted Garnacho. We wouldn't have seen Garnacho as early as this, and boy, has he taken his chance. And long may it last. He's a very exciting footballer.
Yeah, the fans are so excited for the restart, and Garnacho is probably a big part of that. Big part of the reason why the fans are so excited at the moment and going forward, because there's nothing more exciting than a young player breaking into the first team and pressing as much as what he's done, and nothing generates interest as much as that. So I think he's been so good, just prior to the World Cup. You can easily see a scenario where he's just undroppable, and Ten Hag just has to play him in every game.
Yeah. What will be interesting, Kyle, is what happens with Rashford, who has played on the right for England and scored and looked a bit better. The Ten Hag's going to have to make a decision who starts on the left when we get back to proper league action. That'll be interesting to see what he does there. I would like to think that the younger player would have more adaptability and be able to go over and play on the right. Because when we've seen Rashford playing on the right for United, it doesn't have the same impact. But it's a decision has to be made fairly quickly, I would have thought.
Yeah, I would say he'll go with Garnacho on the left and Anthony on the right, and he'd probably play Rashford up front. But he seems to want to give Martial as many chances as possible to prove his fitness. So if he has the choice between Rashford and Martial up top, it'd be interesting to see which one he goes for. But obviously, in the long term, you want to sign someone for that position as well, because we've lost those 3 goals that Ronaldo provided this season, and 2 of them against FC Sheriff. So it's devastating below that. So we're really going to have to replace him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, John Murdo said too early, in my opinion, that there would be no activity in January. That's a role reversal now, because the wages saved with Ronaldo's departure, and that's the only time I'm mentioning that man, between 15 and 30 million off the wages. And the fact that the manager knows and the club knows, if we're going to keep trying to get into the top 4, we need a goal scorer. With the current squad, I don't think we will make it. So it's an absolute must that a striker is signed before the 31st of January.
Well, that brings me on to a lot of the media reports about January today. Sky Sports have been reporting just in the last few hours that there is a significant chance that there will be no incomings at United in January. United are conscious of complying with FFP rules. I remember this coming up in the summer because United's spending was so massive that there was a concern about breaking financial fair play rules, but maybe the Glazers are just using that as an excuse. Some people have said that the Glazers mightn't mind spending money in January because they can just pile it onto the debt, and that can be taken up by the new owner. But that remains to be seen. And Rob Dawson of ESPN went into more detail when he said that, one of the strikers on United's list is João Felix, the Portugal and Atletico striker who's fallen out with the manager there. United may explore an option to loan him in January with an obligation to buy him in the summer so they can meet FFP rules. That'll be purely down to Atletico. Will they be willing to go along with that? I suppose if they're guaranteed the money in June, then they won't mind so much. So it's totally up in the air whether United are actually going to sign someone in January, or maybe they're just briefing the press to dampen expectations in case it doesn't happen. But it may happen. I would say it's 50-50 at this point. So what would you think about the prospect of signing João Felix in January?
Well, he's a very talented player. He doesn't always play to his best every week. He seems to be in and out. But I'm so confident the way Ten Hag has developed his own signings and had the confidence, and we're all satisfied with every single one of them. So I don't have any doubt about that at all. What's the precedent about people, other big clubs that have made decisions that were impacted by that rule that you referred to, that they eventually they weren't docked points or anything, Kyle? I think they took the hit with a fine and warned about their future contract. I think we should go ahead and get somebody. I would go and take a chance with that.
Yeah, well, I've seen the likes of the Milan teams were sanctioned by UEFA for breaking FFP rules, but then we've seen Man City take UEFA to court and PSG likewise, and all they've got is a slap on the wrist. I think the worst punishment they got was a fine and a deduction on their match day squad numbers. None of those two teams were thrown out of Europe, but when you see the likes of City and PSG not being punished and Milan teams being punished, you can draw your own conclusion as to why that was. But it's very inconsistent. But United, I don't know why the United ownership are using that as an excuse, or they're generally worried about it. But if that is something to be concerned about, then they could explore the opportunity to take a player on loan and with an obligation to buy. But the other options include Victor Osimhen of Napoli, who would be perfect for the Premier League, but I don't think he would leave a team top of Serie A and thriving in the Champions League at this moment. That would have to wait to the summer. Then there's the Ramos, who got the hat-trick for Portugal in that he scored 14 goals for Benfica this season. That could be an option for United. And then Cody Gakpo, of course, because he's Dutch, then he's always going to be linked with Ten Hag. But the likes of Ten Hag and Ramos, because of their performances in the World Cup, their price tags will have gone up another 20 or 30 million. No doubt about that.
Well, when the manager talks at the moment in his press conferences, you get the impression from him that he's saying that there are 2 or 3 signings that he's recommended behind the scenes to the board, and he's confident that they'll get on with it and get him somebody. So this news that you're breaking today is quite away from where the manager's thinking. And in regard to who it actually is, I have complete confidence in Ten Hag with his signings that he's already made, that we'll run with whoever he feels can fit into the squad that he's building at Old Trafford.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think most fans would as well, because all his signings have really worked so far. The only one who's not currently starting is Malacia, but even in the last Premier League game there, he filled in at right back and did a decent job when he was up against a world-class player like Willian. So he's even showing his versatility, even though he started off really well and then kind of lost his place to Luke Shaw because of form. But all the other players he brought in the summer have been magnificent, like Casemiro and Martinez, Ericsson, and of course Anthony. So yeah, so I totally trust the manager on whatever signings he wants to bring in, because his record has been impeccable so far in the transfer market. Yes, so it's really up in the air as to what's going to happen in January. As always, it always comes down to the purse strings. But we're hopeful because I know I was joking earlier that Ronaldo only provided 3 goals, but I suppose last season he got 24, and this season we've had a real problem scoring goals. Our goal difference is not. We're winning games by the odd goal, and then we're losing games by getting thrashed, and that's why our goal
Yeah,
difference is 0.
yeah.
So we definitely need someone who can chip in with a few goals.
Well, I think, Kyle, that we've all agreed that the front three that played up until the break is light. It's not strong enough. That's why we're 24 goals or whatever behind Manchester City. It's taking the chances at the top level early in games to kill games and bring the midfield into the game with confidence and less pressure on the back. Now, one point I wanted to make was, do you remember how well Maguire and Shaw played in the Euro and came back to the club team and played really badly? I mean, Maguire isn't a first team starter for me, but Shaw certainly is on the balance that having had somebody to threaten his position as the permanent left back. But let's hope when he does come back that he's up to his game and his mettle immediately, because the last time the two of them were embarrassing how bad they were coming back, having played for England.
Yeah, and some people have suggested that was it 9 United players were knocked out in the quarterfinals of the World Cup, and they might come back a bit dejected, and it could take them a few weeks to get over that mentally. So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they can move on quickly. Yeah, Luke Shaw is definitely going to be a starter for United whenever he comes back, and Maguire, I don't think he's going to play unless there's injuries. Um, People have asked, can he replicate his England form for Man United? I have my doubts about that. I suppose the Premier League is very different and to international football. It's much more, the pace of the game is much quicker. And we know what Maguire struggles with the most is pace.
He sure does, yeah.
So yeah, Varane and Martinez will be first choice for me. But the thing is, I don't think them two are going to be playing in either Martinez is definitely in the final. Varane will either be in the final or the third place playoff. So I don't see any. There's no expectation that them two will play against Forest for me. I think the players that were knocked out in the quarterfinals will come back in against Forest, but I think Varane Martinez might be given a bit of time off. So I could see them coming back in against Wolves, because I think the players who were knocked out in the quarters will get the Burnley game off. Them two would be expecting the same treatment, so they'll probably get the Forest game off. So unfortunately, we might be missing those two players at least until New Year's Eve. That's what I think anyway.
So he'll be back to Maguire and Lindelof then at front of Nottingham Forest.
Yeah,
If what you're saying is right.
yeah, that's what I believe. Unless he's going to throw a spanner in the works and play someone like Tuanzebe or Phil Jones against Nottingham Forest, but
He's too smart for that. Yeah, that won't happen. But I can imagine if Maguire really wants to get more game time, he'll be pressing Ten Hag to say, "Oh no, I'm fine. My fitness level was such at the World Cup. I'm ready to go," knowing that he's going to have an opportunity, and he probably thinks in his own mind that the two players you say won't be available, that he'll get in and stay in. I don't think that'll happen for one moment. But don't be surprised if Maguire starts against Nottingham Forest, because he's the man who has to fight his way back in.
Yeah, and even though he was praised for England performances, he lost Giroud for that winning goal, and in fact, it came off him and into the net. And then he had a header at the other end, which was his big chance for England, and he fluffed it. So even though he was better than what we've seen from him at United in the last 18 months, he wasn't error-free. Maguire in the World Cup, he still made mistakes, didn't he? I think he even in the Iran game, he gave the ball away in his own third of the pitch, which led to an Iranian goal. So he wasn't perfect by any means.
No, he wasn't. And in fact, he and Stones both were very ropey in the first half of that game and gave the ball away. And Maguire is a man who struggles with confidence when he plays for us at Old Trafford in particular, because he feels the fan base isn't supporting him. So I wouldn't take any risk. We need to get early wins and get back on the road again with good form in the Premier League.
Yeah, no matter how well Maguire does against Forest, even if he has a stellar performance and he scores a goal from a corner, I would still bring Varane straight back in against Wolves. And you have to play your best players to give yourself give us a chance of getting into the top four. I just, no matter how well Maguire plays for England, I still don't trust him. And maybe because there's so many United fans who feel the same way. And Maguire, feels that pressure. He knows that United fans have lost belief in him, and maybe that affects him mentally as well. But yeah, I can see Maguire and Lindelof playing the next two games. So just moving on to Jadon Sancho now. Uh, he hasn't rejoined the group. He didn't go to Spain, and Chris Wheeler in the Mail is reporting that Jadon Sancho is training away from Manchester United and will not return until he is physically and mentally ready to play for the club again. Ten Hag sent him off to Holland to train with coaches that he knows there. He seems to be doing everything possible to get him, fit and mentally healthy again to come back and play for United. For whatever reason, he seems to be struggling with something personal. His form is deteriorated badly, but Maguire, Ten Hag certainly hasn't he hasn't decided to bet him off the way Mourinho might have done. He certainly seems to be trying to help him in whatever way he can, and it'd be beneficial to all parties if he managed to come back and produce the form he knows capable of. But it seems to be some way off at the moment.
Yeah, well, people said that with 4 or 5 weeks to go before Southgate named the squad for the World Cup, he sort of knew, or he got a call from Southgate that he wasn't going to be involved. And the speculation is in the press that he took that terribly badly. He came off social media subsequently and seemed to lose the plot. He was ringing in saying that he was ill. You remember he just disappeared for a few games. So there is something that needs addressed. But I do agree with you. Ten Hag is dealing with it the right way, is giving him time and trying to look at ways to bring him back because he is a quality player. There's no doubt about it. We just haven't seen the best of him at Old Trafford.
No, definitely not. Only in moments, really. Like the goal against Liverpool, goal against Leicester, and last season against Chelsea and Villarreal. But these moments have been few and far between, sadly. But Ten Hag is doing his best to work with the player, both on the training field and psychologically as well. So we'll wait and see how that turns out. But it certainly looks like it's going to be January before he comes back into the squad again. Um, so just looking at the team who started the game against Betis. So that was De Gea, Wan-Bissaka, Mengi, Lindelof, Brandon Williams, the left back, Hansen, McTominay, Iqbal in midfield, and in front three, Vilanga, Martial, and Garnacho. I imagine the team against Burnley won't be too dissimilar to that one, unless some of the World Cup players are so eager to get back in, they might start the match. But I imagine that the World Cup quarterfinalists will sit this one out. Ericsson left the tournament at the group stages, so maybe he'll come in. But I imagine the team that started against Betis, um, 8 or 9 of those will probably start against Burnley. Is that the expectation that you have as well?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. The one thing we must make reference to is the terrible injury to Ted and Mengi. And the guy has tried very hard. He's still a young player, but he had a long absence through injury, and he was absolutely devastated when he was taken off on a stretcher. Now, it was an opportunity. We've talked earlier about Garnacho's opportunity. This was an opportunity for Reece Bennett. Now, Reece Bennett was captain of the winning FA youth team last year, and for the rest of that game, that we maybe played 70 minutes, didn't make a mistake, looked very, very good, calm, and his ball distribution was very impressive, I thought. So they're working on him behind the scenes, apparently. He's getting more and more involved with first team training. So you can see what Ten Hag's doing there. He's looking at options for the people who are in the team, and he's maybe saying to them, listen, you need to keep up performing to the level that I expect you to, because I have people in the wings who I'll be given an opportunity if I have to. And that's great. Competitiveness is absolutely key at a top club like ours.
Yeah, absolutely no one should be assured of their place in the team. So I definitely go along with what Ten Hag's trying to do there. Someone that you've been a fan of for a few years is Brandon Williams, and this is the first time we've really seen him under Ten Hag. He's on loan last season at Norwich. So what did you make of his performances on the tour?
Uh, They were so. I thought he started the first game he played very well, but he sort of faded away, and it didn't seem well. You can get there's an explanation to that in that he hasn't played a lot of football since he came back from Norwich. So I think it would take quite a few games before he'd get up to the level that we would expect at someone playing at left back. But you can see what Ten Hag was doing. He was giving him an opportunity. He really has treated the squad well and been fair to most of them. So if you don't make it under Ten Hag, he's giving you an opportunity, and then he'll say, "I think you're not going to be in my 25 or whatever it is. See if you can find yourself a new club." That's the way to do it. Just don't bin people after 2 or 3 games. Give them a positive opportunity to make an impact.
Yeah, unfortunately for Brandon, I don't think Malacia played a single minute in the World Cup, so he might just come straight back into the team because he didn't play any football out there. So that might impact Williams' chances of starting the Burnley game, but it's hard to know at this point. Someone who might start that game who has no future at the club is Wan Bissaka, and I believe also Danny van der Beek went off injured in one of those games. He got injured in the warm up, I think, and there was a late change. It was the baddest game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So those are two players that I think will leave the club next after Ronaldo.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And any sort of money that we would get on their departure, that would certainly help in getting the quality of centre forward that we need before the end of January.
Yeah, because the more wages we can get off the books and the more transfer money we can raise, it certainly helps our chances of getting a striker in, which is absolutely necessary. Um, Also, I think Ten Hag wants to bring in competition for Dallo because I think he's played almost every minute of every game, close enough anyway. So if he was to get injured and he got suspended against Fulham, which left us playing a left-footed player at right back, um, an injury to Dallo would be disastrous. And you can't play him into the ground, especially in the second half of the season. There's going to be basically a game every 3 days until the end of May. So there needs to be someone who can fill in for him, or someone who can compete with him. And there's been lots of talk of the former Celtic right back who now plays in the Bundesliga for Leverkusen, Frimpong, could be available for 25 million. So Ten Hag might want to do that deal, but I imagine Ten Hag's priority will be the striker first, and I'm sure every fan would go along with that. But I would say between January and the summer, he will definitely recruit a right back because we're operating with one really at the moment because the manager doesn't have any faith in Wan-Bissaka whatsoever.
Well, that's fairly clear when he chose Lindelof to play at right back. And you and I know, having watched Lindelof over 5 or 6 seasons, he's certainly not a right back, and that's a weak link. Can you imagine us playing against Foden at City in the return fixture? How Foden would do, what he would do, damage he would do playing against Lindelof. He'd clean him inside out.
Yeah, he definitely would. You wouldn't like to see Lindelof right back against someone like Mbappe.
No.
Be watching the game with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you would like to bring up that has gone on at the club in the last 4 weeks? Any
Uh,
other topics?
Well, I said earlier I wouldn't speak about Ronaldo, but I would like to say how well I think the manager handled that. I've spoken before on podcasts and talked about the Manchester media so fixated with that guy that every press conference, in my humble opinion, was ruined by the first 5 or 6 questions, all being about the future of Ronaldo. Will he play? Will he not play? All that sort of stuff. So I think it's important to see. You've seen how he's dealt with the Jadon Sancho affair. We've talked about it earlier. I think he was brilliant in the way he handled both the media and the player. I think the player let himself down the way he went, the way he did, and left the club. So that's not only have we seen a manager buying well and encouraging young players well, he's had 2 difficult situations and he's dealt with them superbly, in my opinion. I couldn't see Ali dealing with that sort of controversy in the way that Ten Hag dealt with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ten Hag has been flawless in the way he's handled these difficult situations at United. Like we talked about Sancho earlier, he's handled that very well, and Ronaldo, and all the difficulties that have come his way. He's really impressed me so far. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to talk about the ownership situation. Now, a few weeks back, the Glazers announced that they were looking to either sell a minority share or sell the club completely. I don't see anyone wanting to buy a minority share and keep them in charge. That seems a bit fanciful on their part. Um, but United have been linked with so many different people and companies coming to take over, and one that raised its head this week was Amazon, of course owned by Mr. Bezos. Now there could be a conflict of interest there because Amazon are a broadcaster who show Premier League and will be showing Champions League games from 2024.
Mhm.
Now this has caused a problem before when B Sky B and Rupert Murdoch tried to take over Man United in 1999, and Premier League effectively blocked it because you couldn't have one of their own broadcasters owning one of their football clubs. So I wonder will that still be a problem in 2022? I have no idea. But what would you think of the what do you think of the idea of Amazon taking over United and Old Trafford being rebuilt and being called the Prime Arena?
Mhm.
What would be your thoughts on Jeff Bezos being United CEO?
Well, the money is such a crucial thing, both as you say, to invest properly in players, to get a team that's capable of winning the league and finally getting a title back, as we haven't had one since 2013. Uh, there could be a conflict of interest, and that's what you're referring to. And if it was to happen, you could have a legal challenge from any of the three, four big clubs in the league besides United. They might get a good barrister and challenge that. But as regards the principle of a thing, we've waited so long and watched such a poor quality of football for 9 seasons now that this could bring us back into the big league if that was to happen. And certainly, I would have no reservations about it. The sale itself, the way I'm reading it is United. This happened fairly quickly. It surprised me when it did, but Liverpool Football Club is available for sale, and I think that's what prompted the Glazers. That there's going to be, if they don't do and if they leave it, there's not going to be the opportunity to do it as quickly as maybe they want. They hadn't got their dividend now. I noticed for the very first time the last time, and it shows maybe that they are firmly intent of selling the club. We've been waiting for this guy for 17 years. We never wanted the investment, their phony investment, to take place in the first place. So let's grab it if it happens. But as you say, there are many uh, uh, potential owners floating about, but you need to have a lot of money in the bank to get involved.
Yeah, well, I've always said that we don't really need a sugar daddy to come in and provide us with unlimited transfer funds. What we just need to be, we just need someone who's going to be responsible and allow the club's profit to be used on the football team and not being used on paying off debt and interest on the debt and dividends. We just want the money that the club generates to be reinvested in the football club, and of course, update the training ground and Old Trafford as well. But none of that's going to happen under the Glazers. They obviously want to spend the bare minimum, and they don't spend their own money. It's all money that the club generates or borrowed money. So we don't. I don't think we really need to be owned by multi-billionaires or a country, for example. I just think we just need a responsible owner who has the cash to buy the club, obviously. But it's going to get increasingly difficult for us to win the Premier League and the Champions League because state-owned clubs seems to be the here and now and probably the foreseeable future as well. Newcastle, City, PSG, and there could be more. So we don't know who's going to buy Liverpool. So for us to be able to compete, we probably do need someone like Amazon or Apple to own the football club. But for me, I'd just be happy with, you know, the club's revenue being reinvested in the football team. Will that be enough to compete with City and Newcastle long term? That remains to be seen. But yeah, I would like to have the comfort blanket of being owned by one of the world's richest companies, because otherwise we potentially could get left behind. Now you've seen Liverpool have been able to compete with Man City, but I mean that's only a season here and there. Most seasons City win the league, and that's because Liverpool, on the modest budget that they have, if you're competing against a state-owned club with a relatively modest budget, you have to give every single signing has to be the right one. And Klopp and Michael Edwards managed to get it right. But even then, they haven't been able to sustain their challenge against Man City. So I wouldn't be against Amazon coming in and owning the club. Sure, it should be able to provide us with the funds to compete against City and Newcastle long term.
Yeah, you've summed that up very well. I would agree with everything you said there, and most fans would agree with that line of thought. So whatever happens, I think that negotiations and sensitivity will be very, very important, because Manchester United being the club it is, you know the way it is with signings in January, etc., etc. How is it potential buyers going to keep this quiet until it does happen? And I would rather that it doesn't, news don't break until the ink's dry. Let's get whoever has got the right intention to run the club, as you say, in the right way. We just hear about it on the day or the week before it's going to be formally announced at Old Trafford with a press conference. We don't want to go through, if you uh, remember, the De Jong saga went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Well, this is potentially the future of the club that you and I are going to watch and enjoy for the rest of the years ahead of us. And let's get this right. Let somebody behind the scenes, somebody with a bit of credibility, come, not talk to the media, do the business with Manchester United, provide the funds, and show a determination that they're going to lead the club into a new era of success. That's the way I would like to see it done.
Yeah, we all remember that Newcastle fans thought they were getting rid of Mike Ashley at least 4 or 5 times before it actually happened. They were badly let down on several occasions. So that's why I agree with what you're saying there, that we don't want to hear in advance that someone's buying the club and then 2 months later the deal's off. I only want to hear about it on the day that the transaction takes place, because then we know it's definitely happened. Now, one thing I definitely don't want to happen, which has been speculated about, is an American equity firm coming in and buying a big share of the club. That'd be worse than what we currently have, because these are ruthless businessmen who want to, they want to fatten up the club and then sell it on for another profit. And the last thing they're going to do is invest in the football team, the training ground, and the stadium. They want to spend the absolute minimum, and then get maximum profit. It'd just be like the Glazers 2.0. So please don't let that happen. That would be the worst possible outcome.
Exactly. But lessons have to be learned from the debacle that was the Glazer takeover. Surely the people now running the club at the highest level will be very, very wary and being very careful about what happens in the months ahead. But it is something positive to look forward to. At some stage, it might be the latter end of 2023, but as long as this happens, I'll be glad to get rid of the debt and get somebody into the club who's going to, as you say, spend some money on investing in players for the future.
Would you like to think that if an equity firm came in, that the Premier League would block that from happening? Because I believe that the Glazer takeover wouldn't even be possible anymore under Premier League rules, because when Chelsea was on the market, there was an anti-Glazer clause inserted that you couldn't borrow X amount of money to buy the club. You had to provide proof of funds to buy Chelsea. So I hope the same laws are applied to us as well whenever we're getting to.
Oh, very definitely, very definitely. It's unscrupulous the way it was done, and how the various people at the club tried to mislead the fans at the time by saying it was a good investment for the club. We've all seen what's happened since, and it certainly wasn't. It's destroyed the confidence behind the scenes in many ways, and there's been desperation because of the debt and the fans and the protests. We don't want protests at Old Trafford. We want people there singing about a successful team winning trophies.
Yeah, and you're right what you said earlier. Once Liverpool was on the market, then Glazers had to act, because there's only a certain amount of people out there with the funds and the will to buy Premier League football clubs. If the Glazers sat back and allowed Liverpool to be taken over, then there'll be one less person who would have the funds to buy United. So I think the Glazers were probably thinking about this, doing this in the long term anyway. I think now is the right moment because not only because Liverpool are on the market, but because I mean they're running out of the revenue streams are decreasing. United haven't been doing well on the pitch. Um, they're struggling. The training ground and the stadium badly need upgraded. The Glazers are not going to fund that themselves. They spend they spent a crazy amount of money in the summer, which is probably going to be loaded onto the debt. They're still briefing the media that the finances are still being hamstrung by the COVID-19 pandemic and all. So and the Team Viewer, they want to end their partnership. Adidas partnership's up for renewal. That could be, if they renew that, that could be reduced financially. And Team Team Viewer, which was already a reduced deal on the previous shirt sponsor Chevrolet, so they really are running out of ways to make money. So now is the right time for them to sell, and hopefully we get rid of them once and for all.
Oh, that would be great. That would be a happy new year for all the fan base and everybody listening to this podcast.
But I do think that this will drag on for several months.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be done by the end of January. I'll be very surprised. I think hopefully the sale will be completed by the end of the season, and then we can get the new owner in, and the owner can provide the funds for the summer transfer window. But I think they'll be here for the next few months at least. These because I think one of the major stumbling blocks would be the fact that the Glazers want, something like 6 to 7 billion, whereas the people who want to buy the club will want to be paying something like 3 or 4 billion. So it's gonna be months and months of negotiation before any deal is struck.
Yeah, and
Yes.
especially when you're buying a club that has so much debt as we have, I would imagine any potential buyer will be looking at the books very, very carefully and looking at all the angles, pros and cons. And as I say, perhaps the latter end of 2023. But anything earlier than that would be a bonus from my perspective.
Yeah, the new owner would probably have to, if they paid, let's say, 5 billion for the club, that would probably mean um three, 4.5 would go to the Glazers, and the other 500 million would be used to pay off the debt.
Yeah.
So I think the debt will be cleared as part of the seal. Hopefully, I don't want that dragging on into the future. But yeah, I think it'd be great to have someone like Jeff Bezos taking over the club, because I would rather have an American businessman with a crazy amount of money than being owned by an oil rich state like our noisy neighbours and
Yeah.
Newcastle, because there's obviously a morality issue with that, and I know a lot of United fans have stated that they don't want autocratic regimes taking over our football club for obvious reasons.
I would be one
Mm.
of them. I agree with what you say, absolutely, 100%. But it's going to come down to the buck and the dollar at the end of the day. There's going to be a lot of potential buyers, but as you say, there's not too many have billions in their bank balance, so it'll come down to careful consideration and picking the right club, picking the right buyer. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine that we will go for more than what Liverpool go for. I think we're worth more money commercially than what they are. I wouldn't say there's too much in it, but I do think we'll probably be more valuable than them, despite their success. But Man United as a brand is probably just behind Real Madrid in terms of the biggest club in the world.
Yeah, and the fan base around the world and all the countries that sell United shirts, it's a big, big concern. But one positive thought, if you're uh, more correct than I am, and it did happen before or at the end of this current season, can you imagine the demand for season tickets at Old Trafford under a new positive regime looking forward? My goodness, it would be an absolute campaign to get tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. They tend to sell out as it is, but you would get a lot of fans who have not bought season tickets as a protest against the Glazers will come back again. On there's the argument has been made. I think Gary Neville's made as well that we need to possibly knock down Old Trafford and build a new stadium on the same site. If that did happen, you could easily make that 100,000 seater stadium, and it would sell out all the season tickets. Um, yeah, that'd be wonderful. To see you know, like the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is a modern art masterpiece. If we had our own version of that, that would be fantastic. Um, uh,
Absolutely, yeah.
and I think other clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona are going to be heavily investing in their stadiums. And Leicester City have a training ground that is apparently more modern than what we have at Carrington, which is an embarrassment. But then again, we paid for that with 80 million for Harry Maguire.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, the other thought I had was we've talked in recent weeks about Ahmed's performance with 5 goals in 7 games. What's the position about that? I heard the Sunderland manager say that he wouldn't be surprised if he got a call from Ten Hag saying that he would like to recall him in January. Is that possible, or is it in stone that he must stay at Sunderland until the end of May?
Well, I think what I read was that anyone who's been loaned out in the summer can be recalled in January,
Right,
um,
okay.
in an emergency situation or otherwise. But I think I my belief is that United will let him thrive at Sunderland until the end of the season rather than recalling him. But like I said to you privately, if Ahmad could be an option next season, to provide competition for Anthony, because we need more left-footed players in the squad. Um,
Absolutely, yeah.
his spell at Rangers wasn't inspiring, but he's thriving in the Championship at Sunderland, and if that keeps going the way it's going, then I'm sure Ten Hag will be keen to take a look at him in close quarters, and then maybe after the preseason tour, he'll become part of the first team squad as well. So it's one to watch. But I think very much the player who came in at the same time as Ahmad, Facundo Palestri,
Right.
I don't think he's going to get a chance at all. He done reasonably well in his appearances at the World Cup, but I think United will put him up for sale. It doesn't seem he's been on the bench in most of the games this season, but hasn't come off the bench. So I don't think the manager really views him as part of his plans.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, what about the 5 players, Kyle, that contracts are due for renewal that the club has to think about very carefully? I mean, the all 5. I'm not convinced that all 5 should get new contracts. The one I have my doubts about is Fred because of his age, and he's almost 30 now, and we have more cover in the position. I mean, at the latter end before the break, the manager was choosing McTominay before Fred, and Fred was getting very few minutes. So I don't think Fred is such a vital part of the squad that he should be retained, and we should be looking for other players to come into that role once we get the financial once we're in the financial position to do that. What do you think?
Well, remind me who these 5 players are again. So it's
It's De
Rashford,
Gea, Rashford, and De Gea, and who are
Fred,
they? Fred. Yes, Fred is 3. Uh,
and
gotta forget. You're the young fella. You should remember these names. There's 5 of them. Let's see. Lindelof could be one, possibly.
Dallo. He's one, I
Dallow's
think.
an urgent thing that has to be sorted out. That's good. Yeah, that's it. But there's 5 altogether, and they need to be sorted out fairly quickly, I would have thought.
Is Luke Shaw one of them as well? I don't know.
Could be. Could be. It just doesn't.
Yeah, well, all Alexa Rashford, De Gea, Dallo, Luke Shaw, if he's one of them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind those players getting a contract. Although De Gea would have to be a reduced wage, obviously, and I believe he's willing to take a reduction. But Fred, for me, no, I wouldn't renew his contract. I'd release him at the end of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. Just wondered. I think most fans would think that at this stage, the De Gea thing we've talked about in podcasts before, and certainly Christian Brush have their ideas about it, whether or not the current manager is going to retain him as his full-time goalkeeper in the years ahead. I think he'll be talking to John Murtagh and those boys about that. I don't think it's certain that De Gea will be our full-time goalkeeper, say, for the next 2-3 years. I think that our current manager, the vibes I get from him in press conferences, that he's certainly thinking about it.
Yeah, it's one to ponder over because De Gea, he's done well this season. You know, from a shot stopping point of view, as he has done throughout most of his United career. But Ten Hag likes a goalkeeper who's good with his feet. And De Gea, I'm afraid, just isn't the best when it comes to playing it out from the back. So if that's really important to Ten Hag, then I don't think De Gea would be the long term option. But having said that, the goalkeeper we've been linked with the most to replace De Gea is Diogo Costa, the Portuguese number one. Now,
Yeah,
he made a few mistakes at the World Cup that didn't
yeah,
impress me very much.
yeah,
Particularly in the Morocco game where they got knocked out. He was very much caught out there, wasn't he? When that the
yeah,
striker getting there ahead of him, and he was just he come off his line and he didn't win the ball, and the ball ended up in the back of the net.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I know he's a young keeper and he's going to make mistakes, but I certainly wouldn't be spending big money on bringing in based on the World Cup. I wouldn't be spending big money on him to come in and replace De Gea. That would be a massive gamble.
It would,
Um,
it would. But in the world of business, and we've talked about billions to buy the club, isn't it amazing that in 2022 that De Gea earns the fabulous salary of 350,000 a week and doesn't go in a squad of 3 or 4 goalkeepers with Spain to Qatar? That just baffles me. It really does.
yeah, that is because the Enrique, the now former Spain coach, um, he wants goalkeepers. He prioritizes goalkeepers that are good with their feet. And De Gea just didn't fit into that, so he was very much sidelined. But who's to say that Enrique was right? Because Spain had a very poor World Cup and they were knocked out by Morocco. So that was that's just his philosophy. Some people question the importance of having a goalkeeper who's good on the ball, and others feel that it's very much part of the modern game. But yeah, it's a big decision which Ten Hag has to make. Um, I'm just trying to work out who the other players were that we were talking about the 5 players that are out of contract at the end of the
Yeah.
season, but they have a +1 option. So it's definitely De Gea, Dallo, Fred, and Rashford. And
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure who the other one is.
I think you're right. I
Uh,
think it is Luke Shaw. I think his current contract ends and has to be renewed. Now to think
Okay.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, you could be right too. So I don't really mind if I'll trust Ten Hag on the De Gea debate. So I don't really mind if the 4 of them get new deals, but Fred for me, no way. If Ten Hag decided to give Fred a new 5-year deal, I would start to question Ten Hag. To be honest with you.
So would I. So would I. But he's already made a call that McTominay's 4 years younger than Fred, and he seems to. If he's not playing with our number one midfield, it seems to be McTominay who comes in rather than Fred to fill in, say, if Casemiro or Ericsson needed a rest or were injured. You know?
Solo here from the My Night Agenda says, "Do you believe we would get anyone in January?" Like I said earlier, I think it's very much 50-50. We're getting mixed messages coming in from the club on that one. I really, really hope so. And even if it's a loan with an obligation to buy, I'll take that. Because I think we need another source of goals if we're going to guarantee a spot in the top 4. Because as we know, it's getting very competitive for top 4, especially with Newcastle joining the race this season. So
Definitely.
I think we need extra support up front. I wouldn't want to rely on the current crop of players because, like I said, was the goal difference not? I think that tells a story in itself when we're sitting 5th on the table.
Yeah. And the other consideration is the fitness of Martial. You cannot rely on that guy. He's been there 7 years and he has this maybe 5 or 6 good games, then he's injured, then he comes back, he loses interest. Ten Hag has got him more focused, to be fair. But he's not playing enough to justify the huge wage that he gets every month.
Yeah, I think Martial thrives under a manager that puts an arm around his shoulder, and we're seeing that whenever he plays. But like you say, he just doesn't play enough. I mean, he must have played about 20% of our games, So eventually, even Ten Hag will run out of patience with him if he doesn't sort out his fitness issues.
I think so,
Um,
and that's why in his press conferences, the vibes I'm getting from the manager is that he's told the people upstairs he needs somebody in January.
Solo thinks we're being harsh on Fred. He says he's better than McTominay. Um, yeah, well, Ten Hag doesn't seem to think so. In my opinion, is that I don't know. I think Fred probably is a better footballer than McTominay. Um, I think, but both of them for me wouldn't get into Manchester United's first team
No,
if we were going to be challenging for a Premier League title. But I just don't. Uh, I just wouldn't give Fred a new contract. I think I would rather just move on now and get someone else into the buy someone else for the first team squad, or bring or promote someone like Iqbal.
yes,
I just
yeah, and Hannibal's
yeah.
another one that's uh, has the ability to fit in there if he gets a chance. I think the age of Fred. I mean, we've already paid and justifiably so the money for Casemiro and given him a 4-year contract. When you look at the balance of the two players, I wouldn't be giving a 29-year-old Fred a 4 or 5 year contract at this stage. We have better quality coming through. Let's let them have a chance to prove themselves.
And he also says I wouldn't have Martial Rashford as a starter for Manchester United. It's, it's very very strong opinion there. Uh, yeah. I have said that you know, Martial's only good when he wants to be, and Rashford is will be a very good squad player for United. But any United team that wins the Premier League, I'm not 100% convinced that Rashford would be part of the starting 11. Would you go along with that then,
Oh
Nigel?
yeah, I've already said in podcast this very season that if somebody came in the new year or August and offered 60 million for Rashford, I would take that money and use it for other positions in the team that we need to fill as soon as possible. We have people who can play in Rashford's position, and I would go down that line. So, but football's a matter of opinion. But we're totally reliant on the new manager, and I'll go with his judgment.
Yeah, and the main manager has talked up Rashford quite a bit, and I think PSG are sniffing around, and I think Rashford's brother, who's his agent, is using PSG's interest to extract a new contract from United. So I think Ten Hag wants to give him a new contract, but I certainly wouldn't be handing out 5 or 6 year deals to anyone really. I think we need to
No,
keep them down to 3 or 4 year deals, especially players who there's been question marks about in the past. But Fred, for me, yeah, he can be a squad player to the end of the season, but I just don't think on what we've seen since 2018, I just don't think he's worth a new deal. If we want to improve the team on as a squad now, and make ourselves challengers again, and I don't think Fred would fits into that. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, I would release him at the end of the season, but it's all about opinions. If people rate Fred, then that's fine. Me and you have had disagreements with people. Even in public houses about certain players, Martial, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to go back to the Rashford thing, Rashford did score 23 goals. Do you remember when he burst on the scene? Can you see the Rashford of 2022 scoring 20 goals in any season? I don't think his finishing is at the top level to go there again. And that's why we're acknowledging that the front three is weak. We need to step up a bit, and we need somebody that is going to score that on a regular basis, 20 goals every season. And look at the quality we have in midfield now and wide in the wing. We need people that are going to score regularly. Rashford at this part of his career can score 2 or 3 goals fairly quickly, and then 7 or 8 games without a goal. I think it's a level above that if we want to challenge City for the league, and that's our ambition.
Yeah, Rashford's finishing has badly let him down this season. He's never going to be a Van Nistelrooy type striker. I'm afraid he'll chip in with goals. He'll create chances for others, but he's never going to be a deadly goal scorer. Rashford, and as Solo says, Rashford needs 6 or 7 chances to score one.
Yeah.
Certainly 3 or 4 anyway. Um, and he says, "I believe this is the best version of Rashford, and we won't see him get any better." You said that yourself. He has a
Uh-huh.
he has a ceiling, Rashford, doesn't he?
He does. He definitely does. He definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Rashford can get to the level of Mbappe. Not for me.
No.
I know PSG are big admirers of him, and Mbappe is touted to leave PSG, and they might want Rashford to replace him. But tell you what, I'm happy for him to stay and be a big part of the squad. But if PSG offers silly money for him, I'd be considering that.
So would I. Very definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for coming on again, Nigel. And if anyone, please subscribe to the podcast, comment your thoughts down below, drop us a wee like on the video, and hit that bell button to get notifications when we go live. And we will be back next week following the Burnley game. So see you later, Nigel.
See you later, Kyle. Cheers.